Hey chemistry peeps, we're going to try to talk through your chemistry lab book really quick. How you set it up and what you do. So you got your chemistry lab books. Here's kind of what you need to have on it, in it, and we'll get you set for the first lab. So here we go. Once I can get this to run. There we go. So your chemistry lab notebook, it's only used for lab. That's it. And no notes or anything like that. And it could be requested as proof that you completed this course. So we talked a little bit about that in class. That's awesome. So on the front of your lab notebook, you have to have your first and last name, AP Chemistry, and it's 2019 to 2020. And so you're just kind of telling who you are, what this is for, when you did it. That's kind of it. On the inside, you'll open it up. On the inside cover, you don't write out anything. But we're going to go through and number the pages. You only number the right-hand sides. So left-hand sides, they're kind of used for like scratch work, all that kind of stuff. We'll talk about it. But on yours, you have kind of like this blank white page at the beginning. Just flip that. And then the first graph page, you're going to number that, number 1. Put it in the lower right-hand corner. That's kind of it. And you're going to do that for all the other pages as well. However, you do not number the left-hand sides. And so when you open it up to the next page, you do not number the left-hand side. You number the right-hand side. So it goes in the lower right-hand corner, page 2. And not this side, this side. And the next page is page 3, page 4, so on. You number every single page. So go ahead and do that. If you need to pause the video during any time in here, go ahead and do that. Pause it, and I'm going to kind of keep going. But go back to page 1. This is actually where our table of contents start. So it's going to list out what labs we do and what pages that you find them on. So up at the top, label it table of contents. And you can, when you're writing stuff in, if you want like titles to be like 2 blocks high, that's okay. But most of your writing should probably fit inside one of the blocks or kind of one line. Yeah, because you're gonna need the space, all that kind of stuff. But then over here, write title. That's where we're gonna list all the titles of our labs, and page numbers. That's where we're going to list our page numbers of the labs. You'll kind of see what it is. But the first 3 pages are your tables of content. So page 1, this is where we start. Page 2 and 3, you can just leave blank for now. Whether you use them or not throughout the course, we'll see. But you reserve those for your table of contents. Okay. Before we get into actually setting up your lab, just some other rules about your lab. Nothing gets torn out, and no pages get torn out of this. This is a professional lab notebook that you may be asked to present to a college board to get approval and credit for taking AP Chemistry. So you need to keep this thing nice and you don't tear anything out. Nothing gets erased. So if you, as you're writing, just take care as you're writing. If you make a mistake, you do not erase. And you'll work with a pencil just the same way as you will work with a pen. If you do make a mistake, don't scribble it out. It's a single line through. And then you write either above it or to the side the correction that you need to make. And if we're doing graphs and things like that, it's probably a good idea to use things like rulers to make everything look neat, but make sure that you're writing neatly, make sure that you're writing clearly. And this seems to be kind of tedious at the beginning, but the more that you do it, the easier it gets, you'll be good. And as you're going through, and if you need to do work or make notes to yourself that are not necessarily part of your data table or things like that, like you need to know what number of station that you were at, that all goes on the left-hand side. That side of paper that we did not number, that's all stuff that you can basically write whatever you want on that side. but it's not considered part of your lab. And that's for you if you need to write out a calculation or if you want to doodle, whatever. But the biggest stuff as we go on and as we get into lab, make sure that you're doing your best. And we're all going to make mistakes, and that's fine. And I'll talk about that. Be safe, and then have fun. And we'll have a good time. So first lab that we're going to do is the chemical transformations of copper. And you'll find that attached to the same assignment on Google Classroom. So we'll go back to the table of contents, and we're going to write that in. And again, you probably want to write it on one line. You should be able to fit it on one line in your table of contents. Chemical transformations of copper. And it's going to start on page 4. Because remember the first 3 pages? They were strictly for your table of contents. So this starts on page 4. We don't know if it's going to be 1 page of a report or if it's going to be 2 or 3 pages. So it's just like 4 till, we'll figure out what page it goes till in the end later. Okay. Then, yeah, we'll be good there. So that's where we list that. Now let's go to page 4. When we start a lab, you put the title of the lab at the top, you underline it, okay? And then you put the date of the lab underneath. So whichever day that we're doing it first, date goes there. Okay? If it goes on for multiple days, you could say it like started on 9, 9/8 until 9 something something, okay? Or 9/10 till 9 something something. Yeah. And that's kind of it. After that, we're going to list out the different parts of your lab. So the parts of your lab go your purpose, your procedure, your data, your questions and calculations, and your conclusions. There may be other little pieces that get put into other labs as we go, and that's fine. We'll deal with that. But those are your main parts. So we're going to start off with purpose. Before we do the purpose, though, you got to read the lab. And the expectation for labs in AP Chemistry is that you read the labs and that you bring your lab notebook ready to go. And I'll show you what that means. And so on assignment in Google Classroom, you'll also find the lab, chemical transformations of copper. And I want you to read through this, and it'll have kind of different sections. Introduction, here, the purpose, procedure, all that kind of stuff. I'll explain the purpose doesn't really tell you the purpose, it just tells you to figure it out. And there's other things in here that I kind of put in there intentionally. We'll talk about it. But go ahead, pause the video, read through the lab. Done with it? That's great. So when you read through this, it kind of gives you a general background of what you're doing. Make sure that you read through it, kind of understand it. But when we get down to here, now we got to figure out the purpose. Purpose is the reason why you're doing the lab and what you're trying to get out of it. Some cases, the purpose is given to you pretty straightforward. Other cases, you have to kind of come up with that yourself. And so in this one, it is pretty straightforward, and it's actually given to you here. It says you will determine the percent yield of copper at the end of the series of reactions. This right here, and you just have to start at determine the percent yield of copper at the end of a series of reactions. That is your purpose for doing this lab. We're going to figure out the percent yield at the end. That's what you got to do. And so we're going to go back to our lab notebook, and we're going to write that in for our purpose. And the next part is your procedure. And your procedure, you kind of list out what it is that you're going to be doing in lab and things that you need to take special note of, and all that kind of stuff. But it needs to be concise but specific. when you come into lab, like I said, you kind of have to come prepared. You have to have a purpose, you have to have a procedure, and you have to have a data table. Those three things have to be there before you can enter lab, because you need to know what you're doing. You will not be bringing in the lab sheet that has the procedure written on it or tells you what you're going to be doing. You will bring your lab book, and that's it. And your lab book will tell you what you need to do. So you write your procedure in there. For this lab, it's pretty straightforward because you can actually take the procedure that's listed on the lab and put it into here. So I just copied down the first two steps. You can bullet things, you can number things, you can write it out in a paragraph if you want, but that's not usually helpful. Kind of list it out in steps. You can use incomplete sentences, and that's okay. Okay? You can give yourself permission to do that. And I would actually sometimes, write incomplete sentences, that's good, but try to make it concise because we're going to practice that as we go. Okay? So first one just says measure out 0.5 grams of copper metal. You can abbreviate things if you want. You can use chemical formulas, all that kind of stuff. Okay? But notice here that it actually says record the mass and add this to a clean beaker because that's what you're going to do. So that's something that you want to make sure that you keep in there. Then this one says add 5 to 6 milliliters of concentrated nitric acid, and it gives you the formula, all that stuff in the hood. So when you're reading through procedures, there are some things like this that stand out. You don't want to leave out of your procedure because doing it in the hood is necessary. It forms a poisonous gas. So make sure that you do that part in the hood and have it in your procedure. Yeah, things like that. There are those safety things that are listed on the lab. It'll go through the procedure, and really, again, you're copying that down into yours. It'll say like safety alert. You don't have to write this stuff down. We'll talk about it, and there are things that you need to be aware of, and that should be addressed in the procedure already. So, like goggles, you got to wear them, and that's all labs. But that's kind of the gist of it. So you don't have to write down that stuff or the safety alerts. But if you have to go and do it a certain place, make sure that you write it down. Okay? Then, data tables. Data table, you have to create beforehand. This one it's given to you. You can copy it down the way it is in the lab manual, or you could, or the lab sheet, or you could make it like this, where it just abbreviates. But you have to list what measurements that you're going to make and the units. Units have to be there before you go in. And are you measuring grams? Are you measuring liters, microliters, milliliters? Are you measuring in milligrams? All that kind of stuff. Make sure that you know what you're measuring in. It makes lab go a lot quicker for you, and that's kind of what you need to do. There are some questions in the lab that will ask you to write down some steps and observations. So write down your chemical equations. Try to do that on one line. Leave 1 or 2 lines of space, and then write down your next equation. You can go through and kind of do it that way. And the part that I'm really kind of referring to is like, here's your data table, and then here's your data table continue, and it'll say write a balance equation for this thing. If you're not sure about balancing, we'll talk about it, but you can write out the equations because they are given to you in the lab. And I'll let you figure out where those things are. But you need space in order to write down observations because those are going to be necessary. Okay? So in terms of what you need for lab, that's really it. Make sure that you understand what it is that you need for lab and what you're going to be doing. We'll talk through little bits in class. All the other stuff, the calculations and the conclusion, you don't put in yet. You're going to save those for the end. And that stuff, you can go back to your desk and look at the lab sheet to answer out. So the big parts that you need a purpose, you need a procedure, you need a data table so that everything's ready. When you get into lab, things kind of move smoothly. That's kind of the gist of it. We'll kind of talk about it when we get into class, Hope you guys have a good evening. Thanks for watching this. Have a great day.